We are going on an adventure.
Join me as I take you to some of the world's most incredible and romantic ruins. We'll talk about the history, the people, the stories. I'm Evelyn Edwards, and this is Queen of the Castles.
Hi everybody, we are at the birthplace of Mary Queen of Scots, Linlithgow Palace, and I'm actually standing right underneath Mary's statue right now. This is our second stop on our Mary Queen of Scots trail, following in her footsteps. In this episode, I'm going to tell you all about Mary's birth, what was happening politically during her birth, and then I'm going to tell you how she ended up going from here to her next location, Stirling Castle. Mary Queen of Scots was born on December 8th, 1542, on the feast day of the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary. There's actually some debate on what day Mary was born on. Some believe that she was born on the 7th of December and changed it to the 8th of December to fall on the feast day. Mary, however, always believed and always said that her birthday was on December 8th. Mary was born in one of the coldest winters in record. It was so cold that the sea actually froze over. There were boats in Newcastle that were delayed for weeks because of the frost. Linlithgow Palace is 17 miles west of Edinburgh and on the route in between the great castles of Edinburgh Castle and Stirling Castle. In Mary's time, Linlithgow Palace was a great grand residence. Her father, James, had just recently renovated and redecorated in the latest Renaissance style. Linlithgow was considered one of the greatest and most beautiful buildings in all of Scotland. Her mother, Marie de Guise, even said how much she loved the palace and said that it was equal to any of the great chateaus in France. This would be the 5th time that Marie de Guise had given birth. She had had 3 children die in infancy or early childhood. James V, Mary's father, would have in between 7 and 9 illegitimate children living at this time from 5 different women. And if you remember in the last episode, and if you haven't seen that episode, the first episode, I'll link that here so you can watch it. I talk about what was happening right before Mary Queen of Scots was born with her father at Falkland Palace. James had just found out that he had been defeated at the Battle of Solway Moss, and he was humiliated. As soon as he heard this news, he came here to Linlithgow Palace to see Marie de Guise before she went into her confinement to give birth. He was incredibly ill, and he was in an emotionally dejected state. James had actually been born here at Linlithgow Palace, and it's possible that Mary was born in the very same room that James was born in. It's very possible that Mary was born prematurely. After James's visit to Marie, seeing her husband in this low emotional state and physically incredibly ill, it's quite probable that the anxiety and the stress of this brought on the birth early. James would leave Linlithgow Palace, head to Edinburgh, and ultimately to Falkland Palace, where he would live out the final days of his life. He was notified about Mary's birth while he was at Falkland Palace, and 6 days later, he would pass away. James would never meet his daughter. As soon as Mary was born, rumors started circulating everywhere, speculating about the child's health, that she was weak and that she wouldn't live very long. Henry VIII was incredibly interested in what was going on at the time, and letters were being sent to him, and one letter was even sent that the child had already passed away. And in Scotland, we have the complete opposite rumors, that the child was healthy and strong and that it wasn't a girl, but it was a boy. As soon as the child was strong enough to withstand the cold, baby Mary was carried by her nursemaid from the castle here to St. Michael's Church, where she was baptized. She probably entered right through this door right here. She was dressed in a special taffeta white robe that was made specifically for the occasion. She was baptized. She had holy oil anointed on her head, and then she was taken to the high altar where she was confirmed. The beginning of Mary's life, everybody was concerned with two questions. Who was going to govern Scotland in Mary's stead? And the second question was, who was going to marry Mary and form a political alliance with Scotland? Both England and France wanted power and control over Scotland, and Mary became the focus of this. It was almost as if Mary was crown or political real estate. Both of these two countries wanted Mary to physically be in their country, and both of these countries wanted Mary to marry into their royal family so that they would have future control over Scotland. And then back home in Scotland, there were power struggles as well. Who was going to govern Scotland? Who was going to be regent? This was a huge prize because whoever got this job was essentially the de facto king. Two men ended up coming forward for this position. Cardinal Beaton, who was one of James V, Mary's father's main supporters and advisors. He was pro-French and pro-Catholic. And then the Earl of Arran, who was pro-English, and he was the next in line to the throne if Mary Queen of Scots ended up passing away. Well, ultimately, the nobles backed the Earl of Arran, who really wasn't up to the job. He was notoriously self-serving and extremely wishy-washy. But the reason why they backed the Earl of Arran, if you remember the Battle of Solway Moss that we were talking about, when the English defeated the Scottish at the Battle of Solway Moss, the English captured a whole bunch of the nobles of Scotland and took them back to England. Well, Henry VIII made these nobles sign some articles that essentially said that they would push forward the English cause of Prince Edward marrying Mary Queen of Scots. And in exchange for signing these articles, Henry gave a whole bunch of money to these nobles. Well, these nobles came back to Scotland from England and backed the Earl of Arran. So Mary was born in December, and by January, the Earl of Arran was regent of Scotland. The Earl of Arran is now the regent of Scotland, and a few days after he becomes regent, he immediately imprisons his rival, Cardinal Beaton. Back in England, Henry VIII has this great plan that he doesn't want to just rule England, he wants to rule the entire British Isles, and he sees Mary as sort of this one-stop shop to getting that done very quickly. So in March, Henry VIII sends an ambassador to Scotland named Sadler to get a treaty signed, and at the center of this treaty was the marriage of Prince Edward to Mary Queen of Scots. The first person that Ambassador Sadler goes to is the Earl of Arran, and all the Earl of Arran wants to know is, how is this going to serve him? What is Henry VIII going to give the Earl of Arran if he gets this job done? The next person that the ambassador goes to is Marie de Guise here at Linlithgow Palace. Well, Marie de Guise takes this opportunity to squash those rumors that we were talking about earlier, that Mary was weak. So she has baby Mary brought in front of the ambassador, and she has the baby completely disrobed till she's naked to show the ambassador, and through the ambassador, Henry VIII, that Mary, the Queen of Scots, is strong and healthy and that she has no deformities.
What ultimately gets negotiated on July 1st, 1543, is the Treaty of Greenwich. Henry VIII wanted all sorts of things in this treaty. He wanted Mary to be raised in England. He wanted to be in control of her education, what language she spoke. There had to be a lot of negotiating done, and Henry VIII had to make some serious concessions. But what ended up getting negotiated was, in the treaty, it allowed Mary to stay in Scotland until she was 10. That Scotland would maintain its independence, this was incredibly important, and that if the marriage between Edward and Mary ended up being childless, that Mary could return to Scotland as an independent queen. This treaty was effectively dead in the water. There were so many in Scotland that were wary of an alliance with Henry VIII and England, and they favored that old alliance with France. If you remember Cardinal Beaton, he ends up escaping captivity, and he uses this opportunity. He meets with a whole bunch of pro-French nobles, and they sign something called the Secret Bond, which says that they are going to resist the terms of this Treaty of Greenwich and protect Mary from England's plans. On July 27th, Mary is escorted by an armed guard of 2,500 cavalry and 1,000 infantry to protect a baggage claim of almost a mile to take Mary and Marie de Guise from Linlithgow Palace to Stirling Castle.
We've burned the midnight oil here at Linlithgow Palace. I hope you've had so much fun learning more about Mary, her birth, and what was happening in Scotland at the time. I'm so excited to take you to our next location on our Mary Queen of Scots trail, Stirling Castle. So be on the lookout here for that next episode. And I'll see you next time. I'm Evelyn Edwards, and this is Queen of the Castles.